Good evening. Good evening. I first want to ask about acoustics. Can you all way back there hear me? Yes. Great. Thank you. And can you see the screen? Yes. All right, because without that, my talk will be very minimal. There's a lot of visual aids I'm going to use. I want to first thank Ann Blouse, a member of the Baltimore County Historical Society. And also, I want to say what a pleasure it's been working with Jamie. Ann has been prying into our history here now for the past several months and has, by and large, corroborated what we've been saying for the last 45 years to our visitors. I've been really encouraged to see that we haven't been making any egregious errors, but she's given me a certain platform now that we can stand on when we're speaking about the history of this place, which is one of the things that tends to interest our visitors the most. And we host many, many people here in the course of a single year, and we give tours, and we always commingle the history of the farm, the history of the valley, and the history of our winery, as I will do tonight. What I am not going to do tonight is take a really deep dive into the history of the farm. I'm going to mention it, but Ann has done an amazing job in her article that will be coming out in the next issue of your magazine. I think February or March is her target. And I've read the draft. It's very, very well done, very thoroughly researched. So I will actually, this is sort of a team effort where I'm going to give you really the story of how two remarkable entities have come together. First, Long Green Farm, and secondly, Boordy Vineyards. And I want to point out that you're sitting in a very remarkable part of the world of Maryland and of Baltimore County. The area north of Baltimore, the so-called Third Councilmatic District, is where we are right now. And in 25 minutes, you can be at a seat at Camden Yards. This is extremely rare to have dense urban development so close to open, functioning farmland. And when I say functioning, Long Green Valley isn't just a rural ornament. We have in this valley many profitable farming operations of many sorts, Boordy being just one example. It's something of which we should all be very proud. And it's taken a lot of work to achieve what looks like the natural state of affairs. We have thousands of preserved acres in Long Green Valley. We have farmers who are working very hard to make a living and being very creative about it. I'm including nursery, equine, livestock, produce, of course, wine. And our neighbors, the Pregels, make ice cream, yogurt, and cheese. And it goes on. And we have a lot going on in this valley that is a testament to the resilience of American agriculture, and particularly Maryland agriculture. And when we give agricultural tours, we don't really need to leave the valley at all. We can see it all right here. The other remarkable entity that that I'm going to, of course, refer to rather with great emphasis is this winery, Boordy Vineyards, which is in its 80th year. That is a remarkable milestone for any American winery. And we outlasted Lehman Brothers and the Soviet Union, and also the beehive hairdo. I mean, it's really quite amazing. But when you think about the history of American wine, you always have to think about the great hiatus, which was Prohibition from 1918 to 1933. So this winery started in 1945, and I'm getting ahead of myself already, but I just want to say that this winery is a pioneer and a survivor both, and something else for Marylanders to be very proud of. We look at it as a great asset of Maryland. That's how we view this winery, of which we happen to be the current owners and caretakers. So that brings me to who does own Boordy today. You're looking at the group. It consists of my sister Sally, my brother-in-law Bailey, my wife Julie, and my son Phineas are the sort of operating owners of Boordy, and it is very much a family company. It has been a largely a joy to be in this profession. Occasionally there have been little hiccups along the way, known as nature on one side and marketplace on the other, but having said that, we feel privileged to be living on this farm and running the winery. The farm itself was first settled by the Giddings family, and Anne has found, I think, 1721. The first colonial settler was Thomas Giddings. However, we have found plenty of arrowheads, and I believe the tribe was the Piscataway tribe. Correct me if I'm wrong. I see an affirmation over here. Thank you. And we find them on plowed fields after rain. And we would walk the fields, and it's always a thrill to reach down and pick up an arrowhead. And my father always used to say that the last person to touch it was an American Indian. So they were here. Understandably, it's a very fertile valley, very beautiful valley. But Thomas Giddings leased the land from Lord Baltimore in 1721. And what's remarkable about this farm is that it's had 3 family ownerships since then. The Giddings family, then the Noyes family very briefly, and now the DeFord family. And we came here, interestingly, twice. The first time was when my grandfather, Robert DeFord, my namesake, was essentially orphaned at a fairly young age by the death of his parents, and his aunt, Julia Bell DeFord, took him in, and she was married to a Giddings and lived on this farm. So my grandfather grew up here. It was then sold out of the Giddings family. By the way, Williams Road is named after a Giddings descendant. And also, I grew up with people named Boyce and Giddings in this valley. So they've been around a long time. But we do have a cemetery, a very historic cemetery here where the Giddings are buried. And I'm happy to say in the spring of next year, there's going to be a ceremony for James Giddings, who fought in the Revolutionary War. The sons of the American Revolution are going to put a commemorative plaque on his grave. Now, what's interesting is that my grandparents, who are pictured right here, lived in Towson, and this is my grandfather, Robert DeFord, who grew up here, moved away, had a place in Towson called Folly Farm, right on Jarrett's, help me, Bailey.
Chestnut.
Sorry? Chestnut. Yeah. Right in Towson, basically. It's Pickersgill now, right? Yeah. At any rate, they were looking to move away from Towson because they wanted more elbow room. It was getting developed and so forth. So what do? They find this farm is for sale for, I think, around $60,000. It was terribly run down, but they bought it. And they moved out here with my parents, newly married, in 1941. Well, their parents had married in 1938. They moved out here in 1941. And Robert DeFord Jr., my father, decided that he wanted to be a full-time farmer. He had tried corporate life, didn't like it, so he chose to be a full-time farmer. And during World War II, Robert DeFord Jr. was in the engineer corps, and he was in Europe. And his wife, my mother, Anne, and my aunt, Sally, ran the farm. And here you have a wonderful picture of them on probably the same John Deere tractor that I grew up driving. And there's a wonderful little story about how much grain and how many chickens and how many pigs, and they did a tremendous job. So that turns out was kind of the norm during World War II. And then Dad came back from the war, and things went back to the patriarchal approach to running the farm. However, post-war was a time of great change and challenge for the small family farm. Why? Well, the interstate system was built. Great plumbing projects in the western part of the United States turned desert into four-season cropland. Railroads, air travel. A fresh tomato could come to you from Peru. We were growing produce. We were growing turkeys here. We had beef. We had a prosperous, typical small American family farm, And if you remember, around World War II, I think nearly half the population was farmers. Today, it's a little under 2%, I believe. So to get from that 49% to 2%, there's a lot of, obviously, traumatic change that's taken place in the small family farm. And we needed to find a way to survive, adapt and survive. Now, I'm going to drop back here to 1918, if you will. I'm going to interrupt my story about the farm, and it will come together in a minute. In 1918, Prohibition was passed. And this was a very grand social experiment, which did not go terribly well. And it was a disaster, both from the perspective of actually being able to control drinking, but also from a revenue perspective. So in 1933, it ended. And it ended mainly because the government wanted the taxes, and it realized that you couldn't stop people from drinking. But coming back to the Boordy story, Philip Wagner, who was a correspondent, ran the London bureau for the Baltimore Sun, and lived in Maryland, saw an opportunity. He wrote a book called American Wines and How to Make Them in 1933, and it became an overnight sensation because it was the only guide of its kind available in the English language, because during Prohibition, there was no market for this sort of thing. So he had 3 printings back to back in 1933, and he notes in his preface, let me go back here a minute. He notes in the preface to the book, I'm going to read this out loud, wine has enjoyed increasing popularity throughout the period of Prohibition. I have even heard it suggested that if Prohibition were to continue in force for another decade, we might reasonably expect the United States to become a wine-drinking nation. So there was one little loophole during Prohibition, which is you could make 200 gallons of wine in your own cellar. And Phil Wagner took, as you can see from this photograph, full advantage of that loophole. And he and Jocelyn planted grapes, his wife Jocelyn planted grapes that they had come across during his travels in France. And he made experimental wines, and ultimately what came out of this was Boordy's first commercial bottling in 1945. And I want to go back a couple of slides because this is, before Boordy was founded, Côte de Rider Wood was what he called his early brand. Rosé 1941, and this is a 1938 document for the importation of 25 vines from France. So he was a true pioneer. And he started the winery in 1945, and this is a shot of the very first bottling at Boordy. Meanwhile, over the next 20 years to 1965, Boordy grew quite rapidly. It grew faster than Wagner could find grapes to supply the demand for his wines. So he started approaching people that he knew in Baltimore County who had land, and he approached my father and said, you have 2 important things. You have land and you have labor, referring to his 4 children, Sally, me, and my 2 brothers. So we had jobs. And this is a shot from the early 70s when we always hand harvested the grapes. That's my father on the truck weighing them in. They were carried down to Boordy and processed into wine at Boordy. So we were growers for the winery from 1965 to 1980. And it was during that period that I personally became acquainted with winemaking, because apart from the fact that Sal and I and Bailey, who came to a famous dinner at our house, were always put in the hot seat, and we were always served wine when we were very young. Wine was part of our culture. We grew up drinking wine, so it was a familiar beverage to us. But what I'd never seen was how it was made. And this period of time, 1965 to 1980, got me into fascinated by the production side. In 1980, we purchased the name Boordy and the equipment from Phil Wagner. He, by that time, was in his 80s, and he wanted to retire. And he had no heirs who wanted to follow him. And also, Riderwood, Maryland had become rather a Tony neighborhood. When he moved in 1945, it was Bigfoot country. Well, it had turned into a rather posh suburb of Baltimore, and the stench of winemaking, the fruit flies, the trucks going in and out were less than welcome. It was time to move on. So here's a shot of us loading the tanks onto a truck, and this is at the old Boordy, and we're taking it out to here. So that was August of 1980. I had gone to wine school in California for the year, and had come back in the late spring of 1980, and we had very little time to get things in order before our first crop came in, which, you know, nature waits for no one, and we knew that late August we were going to have to process grapes. Meanwhile, this barn, which you see pictured here from that era, was not the barn you're in today. I mean, it is the barn you're in today, but it, in many respects, was a very different barn. 2 feet of cow manure downstairs, and hay nearly to the rafters up here, and needing lots and lots of work. And we are not the kind of winery that had a tech company backing us, like many today. We were basically going at this a brick at a time. So our first job was to convert this wonderful barn, which, by the way, I will say Phil Wagner actually recognized as having tremendous potential. He was a visionary in that respect for the future of the winery. So the barn was called upon to do many things, and this is where we started to rub up against the what we do is called value-added agriculture, and that means that we are vertically integrated. We grow, we process, and we sell what we grow and process. That's called vertical integration, or in the farming world, value-added agriculture, because you are creating a product which captures all the value that comes from turning that product into a finished, raw material into a finished product. In this case, we grow the grapes, we make the wine, we sell the wine. However, as simple as that may sound, the first thing I discovered is that it was not a welcome concept in Towson. Usually with building codes, a building does one thing. It's either an office, a warehouse, it's production, it's retail, whatever, but it doesn't do 6 or 7 things. Well, this barn was being asked to do 6 or 7 different things. And what are the limits? What are the allowable uses? What are the allowable activities? It's been actually a fascinating exploration for us to go through that. And by necessity, we got involved in the political process, among other things, in order to basically grow and survive. But one thing that was not ever mentioned when I was in wine school in California was the word sales. Oh, you have to sell this. Oh, I thought you just had to make it and people would beat a path to your door. So we got into some wild things over the next couple of decades in selling wine. I'll point out a few. Fancy advertising with paid models, chef's dinners, a deal with bringing in our Nouveau wine with an elephant, handing it to me at the Baltimore Zoo. Bailey taking a bottle of wine for the Chesapeake Bay Foundation in Annapolis. Wine festivals. And the list goes on. And it has been a fascinating education. A lot of wineries don't engage at the scope that we have chosen to engage with the market. They are saying, fine, we're going to just be like a roadside stand at the farm here. But because we took over an existing winery, we had to be much more present in the bigger markets. And one of the most important watersheds in our industry was when the wineries first came together from all of our little enclaves. There were 7 wineries back in 1984 when I'm referring to, so it wasn't a very big deal, but we never talked to each other. We hardly knew each other's names or where they were. But finally, we got together and formed an association, and the first thing we did was form the Maryland Wine Festival, which took place up in Westminster. And to our shock, the first year that we did it, 5,000 people showed up. We didn't even know 5,000 people knew who we were, much less. And then in the next 3 or 4 years, it grew to 10, 15, 20, ultimately 25,000 people. And then Howard County sort of looked over their shoulder at Carroll County and said, wait a minute, this looks like a good deal. They created Wine in the Woods in 1988, so we had 2 very large festivals going on, which were thrilling to see people who cared that much about Maryland wine and appreciated it. So that was a lot of fun. We also had to engage in Annapolis at a higher level because one of the things that you can't do in the wine business historically is ship it to people's homes the way you can ship a pair of LL Bean boots or even a pocket knife or even plutonium for that matter. You know, wine is looked at as a particularly difficult substance to ship because of it's a controlled substance. So it took 31 years, but we finally earned the ability to ship wine to people's homes, which has proven to be a very important thing for wineries across the United States, including ours. It means we can have a wine club. It means that we can reach states where distribution is extremely difficult to break into because people move around a lot, and they may have a fond memory of Boordy, and they want to keep buying our wine so we can ship to their houses. This is the celebration where I worked with a wonderful attorney named Pat Roddy and our now Secretary of Agriculture, Kevin Addix, when we were celebrating the passage of a law that allowed us to ship to people's homes. So there was a political dimension always to what we do. But guess what? After all is said and done, what really matters is what's in the bottle. So throughout our history, our ownership, I'll say, we have tried to recognize where we needed to how we could make significant improvements in the quality of our wine. And it really does begin in the vineyard. So we had always had grapes here since we've owned the winery even before, as I mentioned. But, you know, the vineyard here is in existence because we happen to own this farm. It's not that we chose the farm because it could be a vineyard. We put a vineyard on the farm because we wanted to help make the farm viable. So we realized that we needed another site that kind of spread our risk with nature. If you have just one vineyard, everything that can happen in nature will happen, and it'll happen to you in that one site. But it may not happen if you have a second site, particularly if it's removed by enough geography that you have truly different microclimates in the 2 locations. So what I'm showing you here is that we added a second vineyard called South Mountain, which is right on the Appalachian Trail in the western border of Frederick County in a little town, Civil War era town called Burkittsville. Beautiful, beautiful town. And the 2 vineyards are very different. First, you have Long Green Vineyard here, which is located at about just shy of 400 feet above sea level. And we have a valley that is clay and limestone. We have hills that are decaying granite called schist. And it has a particular set of circumstances that allow us to make fragrant but light-bodied wines. Our growing season here is a month shorter, believe it or not, than it is out at South Mountain Vineyard, which is 80 miles to the west, further from the bay, but on the flank of the Blue Ridge Mountains facing southeast. So when the sun comes up in the morning, it warms that body up, that land up very quickly. And we have 2 weeks on the front end and 2 weeks on the back end, additional time to ripen our grapes out there. So in fact, some of the wines you've had tonight come from that vineyard. And the best reds that we make come from South Mountain Vineyard. So that was a big step in quality. And we also came to the realization that the vineyards we had aged in place quite a bit and had been planted with knowledge that was viable and valid at the time, but the science and art of viticulture had progressed a great deal, and unfortunately there was no Band-Aid we could put on it. We had to actually swallow a very bitter pill and replant everything, which we did from 2008 to 2018. We couldn't do it all at once for obvious reasons. There wouldn't be any wine, so we did it incrementally. And there's an adage in our business which is that good wine starts in the vineyard, and it truly does. It's not the whole story, but if you have good grapes, you're well on your way to making good wine. And I will say also the vast experience that we have here, and I want to really point out that one of the great blessings of this business has been the people who have chosen to work and spend their lives here. And I mean people who spend decades here, honing their skills, and particularly I want to point out Ron Waits, who is our vineyard manager, who came from another winery, a very small winery. He had a background, a degree in horticulture, and when I showed him his office that we had just built for him, he said, "Thanks, but I won't be using it much. If you're looking for me, I'll be out in the vineyard." And he was absolutely correct about that. He was true to his word. So the viticulture, I think we made some difficult decisions. We got good sites. We replanted them. We have a wonderful man running our viticulture program here. Next comes what happens to the grapes after they get here. And in 2013, we swallowed another big difficult pill, which was that our wine equipment was very, very out of date. And I felt this as soon as I got back from wine school in 1980. The equipment was about a century out of date. And we needed to build, if we were going to be serious about this, we needed to build a winery. And one of the key points here was that my son Phineas had announced some years earlier that he wanted to succeed us, this generation, and take over the winery someday. And that gave us a new sort of long-term vision for our prospects to evolve beyond this generation. Very, very important. So we built a new winery, and it meant that if we brought beautiful grapes in, we could make beautiful wines with those grapes. And that winery it made the cover of the national wine magazine called Wines and Vines. Everyone in the nation saw it because it was so impressive. It doesn't look like a fancy new winery. It looks like one of the buildings around here, which is great. But inside it looks like, it's like, in the Wizard of Oz when you go from black and white to color. We're not in Kansas anymore. Well, when you go inside the winery, it's a wonderful moment because it's super high tech. But it's not all about high tech. It's about handling grapes properly. And this is our winemaker. Another talent I'd like to call out is Jose Real, who is a highly trained winemaker from Spain. He's here courtesy of a lovely lady he fell in love with who lives in Baltimore. And he needed a job, and we needed a winemaker. So that's how it sort of fate works. But Jose has the skills and the artistry to make the beautiful grapes that are brought into the best wine we can possibly make in this winery that was built. And this has paid off. And I don't want to stand here and boast, but I just mean that we started to hear back from our customers, "What have you done out there? The wines are so much better. What's going on? What's going on at Boordy?" And I said, "Well, come on out and see. It's pretty interesting out there. Lots is going on." And indeed, it was gratifying to hear unprompted people say they saw, they felt, they tasted the difference from all these initiatives. Then the last thing I'll say that we really felt needed help was our wonderful big barn. And the restoration took place in 2023. I've spoken to a few of you tonight about it, but a few things I'll point out. First, it was, as you can see, some of these are fairly small pictures, but it was a wonderful Amish company from the Lancaster area that literally does work all over the United States. Incredibly sophisticated company. And we worked with a local architect with whom we've done a lot of work. Everything was gone over in fine detail. What can we restore? What do we need to improve? But number one was retain the soul of the building. That's its heart and that's why we love it. So the building you're in tonight has been completely restored, temperature controlled. Your feet are on ash boards that were sawn from ash trees that came off of our farm that had been afflicted with emerald ash borer. These beautiful tables are made from walnut and white oak that came from our 2 vineyards. The lights up there are from wine vessels that we used when we were a very small winery. You know, it goes on. We had a wonderful time challenging these Amish craftsmen with different ideas. They said, sure, we'll do that, no problem. Anything else? they were just terrific people to work with. That was completed. I'm sorry? Who was the builder? Their name is B and D, Ben and Daniel. They started as roofers, and they were a joy to work with. And they are, there's nothing simple about their company. They have a forge, they have a sawmill, they have everything that you could want. They were just a treat. And so this is the barn that you're in tonight. It's ready for the next 200 years and beyond. And I'll say that this has been one of the most satisfying things about the journey that we've been on is the ability to save a building like this, which is such a proud, let's say, tribute to Maryland's agricultural past. Many, many barns like this succumbed to the period I mentioned earlier when small farms were being threatened. This barn is a survivor, happily so. And as you may know, we're listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The valley is. The farm per se is not, but the buildings on this farm were contributing to the listing of the whole valley. There are really a lot of wonderful buildings in this valley that date back to the 18th century, and some very forward-looking people in the early 1980s, I think it was 1982 that we were listed, saw the importance of doing that way before it dawned on most people how important it would be.
Did that create problems for you with the builder?
No, we wanted to do the building as historically correctly as possible, and we actually got historic tax credits. And that meant that someone was breathing down our neck all the time. In 2000, my mother, Ann DeFord, placed this farm in permanent preservation, which is great because the future is always uncertain, but one thing's for sure, nobody can hurt this place. And another wonderful thing that she did, I think Bailey had a lot to do with this, my brother-in-law Bailey, but it was a family effort, is we converted 10 acres of Long Green Creek, which runs through the bottom of the farm, into a wetland. And you can see, here's before. I thought nothing was wrong with that. It looked perfectly fine to me. But here's after.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's been, I think, the most exciting thing we've done on the farm. Maybe second to having kids and building a winery, but maybe number 3. Yeah, it's just a stunning thing. And literally, it says here otters. Otters, for a while, moved in. The beavers, they built a lake down there when you couldn't get a permit to build a pond. But, you know.
How many acres total is the entire?
Farm is 250, but it's now with, after my mother left us, it's divided into 3 siblings. But because of the Maryland Environmental Trust, you would never know it. There are invisible lines on the ground.
One more question.
Yeah.
The elevation here, how does it compare to the elevation up in the other vineyard?
Good question. So the question was, how do the elevations of this location compare with the other vineyard? We're about 350 feet lower here than the other vineyard. I think the soil is really, really poor out there, meaning the vines have to struggle, which means there's less water in the grape, which means the flavor is more concentrated. So bad soil equals good wine.
Is it more potent?
More potent. Now she wants alcohol.
I
Well, actually, you're correct because the sugar levels go higher out there, and that's what drives the alcohol content. Yeah, we're getting sugar. We're getting ripeness like I never thought possible. I could never have dreamed of it. It's really amazing. So I'm closing now, and if James is still here, I'd like to give a nod to James, who helped us tonight, and who actually runs all the wonderful events that we do here at Boordy, including upper left, the Baltimore Symphony has now played here 5 years, which is, when I was, ankle deep in cow manure, I never would have guessed that would be possible. But we do a lot of wonderful things throughout the year. It's all part of the business that we're in, which we look at wine as part of the good life, part of a good meal, part of good company, and we live that here. It's been really a wonderful journey. And with that, I want to thank you very much for your attention, and happy to take any questions you might have about anything to do with wine or the farm that I can answer. Any questions? Yes?
I'm a little confused. So during the Depression, liquor was prohibited, but wine was not?
No. During Prohibition, first of all, yeah. During Prohibition, there was this family allowance that sort of, I think it's probably the only way they could pass the law, because there are a lot of people who just plain wouldn't give it up. And so said, let's make it at home. And so that's how it worked. It wasn't commercial wineries. To make it commercially, you had to have a sacramental connection. You're correct. And a lot of people got religion during that period, I think. But it was legit. It was legal to make 200 gallons in your home for family consumption, which is, who drinks 200 gallons of wine?
We did as kids. We started at age 7 with wine at dinner.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, we started very young, so to no apparent harm. Yeah.
So the original wines were sourced from France. Have all your wines been sourced from France, or have you gone to other areas of the world?
Could everyone hear the question? Where are the vines sourced from, if I could just sort of shortcut that. Yes, there's French parentage in all the vines that we grow. And there are two kinds. One is a mechanically grafted vine. Root and what's called scion is grafted together. So the top part, the scion, is what gives you the Chardonnay or the Riesling or the Cabernet Sauvignon. The root, believe it or not, comes from an American vine, because there's a disease that attacks the roots of European vines that American vines are resistant to. So there's a grafting. All of our plants are two-part. The other solution to that problem was to cross-pollinate American and European vines. That has largely been abandoned because grafting is a much more efficient way to do it. However, a little footnote, with climate change, new diseases are showing up, and hybridizing or cross-pollinating is now gaining new attraction. So we'll see where this all heads.
Barrels all the same for everything, or do you?
Barrels? So question about our barrels, they're all also from France, because we have white oak is the only species of American oak that can actually hold liquid. And it has it's great for whiskey, but for wine, it's a little bit too sappy. It's a very pronounced flavor. Okay. So we import all of our barrels from France. And a barrel lasts 5 years, and currently costs about $1,200 or $1,300 per barrel. Yeah, and holds 60 gallons of wine. We turn them into things like this. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, what would be the best white grapes to grow and the best red grapes to grow on South Mountain?
Oh, great question. What would be the best white and best red grape to grow on South Mountain? We're really falling in love with this white grape called Albarino that we serve tonight, which is a Spanish variety that we already knew about, but our Spanish winemaker, our winemaker from Spain, encouraged us to grow it.
Jose, right?
Yeah, we had already moved in that direction. We were already planning it, but he said, this is a really good grape for this region. The red that we like the best is Cabernet Franc, one of the 5 Bordeaux reds that works extremely well here. And it's emerging as a real champion. And I think the Mid-Atlantic, you know, political boundaries don't mean much to grapes, right? So the Mason-Dixon line, they could care less which side of that they're on. But there are boundaries that do mean something, you know, that are geographical. And I think that the Mid-Atlantic has a special set of circumstances that, in my opinion, in not too many years, it's going to become known. And this is not just self-serving, but I think that with changing climate, we are able to grow varieties that are grown in the Bordeaux region, and we can grow them as well as they are grown in Bordeaux now. Wow. And when I went to Bordeaux, Julie and I took a trip there. I just felt like I was right at home. Yeah, I just said, this is just like making wine in Maryland. They have the advantages and disadvantages that we have. You know, it's not easy. We have a bottle of wine here that commemorates our 80th anniversary that is the most stunning wine Boordy's ever made. It has also the most stunning price Boordy's ever charged. So don't get too excited. Yeah, but it is. If you ever told me that that this winery would make a wine of that quality, I wouldn't believe it. It's just amazing, and wine it takes a long time to get good at this, and it also there's nothing written. You have to pass it on by word of mouth. I mean, there are a lot of textbooks, but they don't tell you the true story.
And Cab Franc is the base of that wine.
Yeah, what's it, 60% of that wine, Jay? 40%. So we do a lot of blending because one grape isn't necessarily the whole story. This particular wine is called Founder's Reserve, and it commemorates our 80th anniversary, and we named it in honor of the Wagners. And I don't think, if Philip Wagner were alive today, he wouldn't believe that this wine came from this winery. I can promise you that. Because he could not, because it was colder back then, and viticulture was not where it is today, he could not grow the grapes that we can grow. He could not make the wines that we can make today. Yeah?
How many employees are working the farm?
Let's see. If you take full and part-time, we're probably 20 people, something like that. Yeah. I mean, in numbers, we're, that would be full-time equivalent. I guess we're probably more like 40 or 50 because we have a lot of representatives out doing tastings in stores and things like that, working festivals. Oh, right here. Let's see. I don't know. I'm going to say 10 or 12, something like that.
Plus you have the other place too that has.
Yeah, I don't know the number right off the top of my head. Let's say 15, probably. Yeah. But we use what's called an H-2A visa, agricultural visa, and we bring 6 people in from El Salvador, have for the last decade, to help us in the vineyard. Here's a statistic for you. We have 70,000 vines. Each vine has to be visited on foot in person 8 times, which is 560,000 vine visits in one season. And that's not including what we do on the tractor. So the manual operations require a lot of care to grow good grapes.
Are the people that you bring in experts at wine?
They've become experts. The same group has been coming for 10 years. Okay. They have learned how to do it now, and it's been great. They're wonderful. And I think it's the best thing ever because they go home with a pocket full of money. We supply the house, a guaranteed wage, transportation, airfare, everything. And it works out for everybody.
So my thought is, there's so many wineries around, and you could buy your grapes from all over. And Maryland has, over 100 wineries now.
Yeah.
And I'm sure most of them have their own vines. So would it pay you to forget the 2 farms and buy the grapes outside?
So, question would it make more sense for us just to buy the grapes and not grow them, you mean?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
do you buy outside?
It's a great question. Can everybody hear the question? Why don't we just buy grapes from someone else instead of going through 560,000 vine visits a year? Because there is a built-in antagonism between a grower and a winemaker. And the grower wants tonnage and the winemaker wants quality. And we have bought grapes for years, and that just plain is the way it is. And you want them to reduce the quantity of grapes so that the vine has the energy to really ripen what's there. We reduce our crop. It's a painful, hateful thing that we do every year. We cut about 40% of the grapes off the vine and drop them on the ground before they're ripe, so the remaining 60% are really great. Try to get a grower to do that who's paid by the ton. It doesn't work.
So you grow all of your own grapes?
At the moment, we import a very small fraction because we were particularly Riesling, which we tried to grow for 18 years and then warming climate wiped it out. So we buy that from out of state. The rest at the moment, we are at the size we're today, we're estate grown, meaning we grow the grapes.
But just your Riesling you buy out?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we gave it the old try, 18 years, and it didn't, we got the message. It just doesn't belong here anymore. Well, I'm going to thank you all very much. It's been a long evening. I really appreciate your attention. Our winery is your home. Come out anytime. We're only closed 6 days out of the year. So we make it easy. Thank you. Thank you. And thanks to the Historical Society for doing the research. Really appreciate it.